In this video, I want to actually send the event messages. In the last video, we we worked on XR Grip Manager, and we have this pipeline that is observing the event that a grip was squeezed, and we say that we got here, that's our side effect, and we find an intersecting mesh which has some tags. So let's fix that function, find intersecting mesh, so make it actually work again. Oops. That will find the intersecting mesh. And then it will filter to see that there is indeed something that's intersecting, and that we're currently not grabbing something. So we can only grab something if we're not already holding something. So if we're holding something, and let's say the other hand steals it from us, and then we grip it again, that's not possible, because let's see, every time we release, we should be unsetting that, right? When do we use the intersected mesh? Intersected mesh. See, it comes through and we set that intersected mesh. Okay. So in case we need to know what is the thing we're grabbing, we have that reference. And so if you're squeezing something and we don't need to check this because there's no way it can be null. If you've gotten this far, oh, this is the other hand. We're seeing if the other hand finds an intersecting mesh, and that intersecting mesh is equal, that means you were grabbing the same thing. That just means we're grabbing the same thing. So if other hand grabbed the same mesh away from us, or the first hand released the mesh, I don't think we need to find the intersecting mesh. We just say, if you released here and you're still holding it, So I think if the other hand steals it, then we should probably unset. We should probably unset this dot intersected mesh equal null. Because you're not holding it anymore. And in the first case, if you just release your hand, we don't need to check if it was stolen, because if it was stolen, what if it's stolen by something else? Like you're holding on to it, but it's not your other hand, but somebody else takes it from you. So it's like the object kind of needs to know who's gripping it at all times. Should we keep a cache of who's gripping what? Entity grab says who's grabbing it and what hand. So if another hand grabs it, it's taken away. And if somebody, third-party person grabbed it, then it's also taken away. And so if we release, we just need to check, are we the current one holding that mesh? Because if we can get that, then we don't have to check. Just whenever we release, if it gets to this point, then we don't need to check. We just need to unset. We just need to, yeah, if you get that this hand is released, if you're still here, then you say emit entity released. Or you could get a signal like signal hub incoming on event. Type of event on this pipe filter message, and the message dot this equal entity grabbed and message p dot the entity ID entity ID equals this dot mesh intersected mesh dot ID and message PD member ID not equal this member ID. So if we get to this point, it means someone has stolen. So it's one of this or this. One of these. Return race. I feel like this should be the thing that we do take until. Are we using this mesh? Interactive. I don't think we're using this mesh. Shootable, subscribe, and then take until this basic interactive. I don't even think I need this. As soon as you get any one of those, you will exit this tap. Alright, so how do we harden the messages? We're going to say when somebody grips this thing and it's intersecting an object of that we're interested in, and So we set that mesh, and we get the tags, the mesh and tags. So if the tags says shootable, we go shootable subscribe. Otherwise, we do basic interactable subscribe. Just subscribing to this or this or this. And then it needs to end, right? We also need to send the acceleration when you release it. Let's take a look at Signal Hub. Squeeze and release, and also types, entity released, impulse. I think we need linear velocity and angular velocity. Linear velocity, that is a number. Angular velocity, that's another number. Entity grab, entity released. And never mind the entity assume for now. We also need the tags of the entity. I suppose you can get the tags on the other side. Everybody has the tags. Alright, so let's do this entity grab one. So when it gets into the shootable, I guess we can put back the pipe in 1. One, two, three. Dot. Erase dot pipe. Take 1. That way it'll still work. What's going on here? I think at this point we could emit. I have some previous code. Let's see, emit. So we can create an event payload here. Look like, so you have the intersected mesh, which we've already assigned somewhere. This palm mesh rotation. Okay. What is this palm mesh? This palm mesh is, okay, it's a reference to that. So if it's getting updated due to its parenting, and then we check its position and rotation, yeah, that should give us the latest whenever this executes. And so this intersected mesh, and then this member ID, entity ID is this intersected mesh and that. And we're going to send the hand position and the entity and that, and the hand. So that gives us the payload. And then this is the emitting of the event. So we can probably do that right here. At this point, we've grabbed it. I think what to do with it depends on the type. So we're going to say the event equals entity grabbed. And it'll be this. Actually, we don't have to send anything. That's the event. And we're going to emit that outgoing to everybody and to ourselves. And if the tags includes shootable, then we will subscribe to trigger squeezes at this point. And if so, we can say shoot projectile. So we need a type for this. It can be projectile fired. The payload is how about trigger squeezed, but it's a special kind of trigger squeeze. Entity held trigger squeeze. How about entity triggered? It's short. It shows that it's something to do with the entity, and triggered implies the trigger button. How about entity trigger squeezed? So who is the member ID that's doing the squeezing? What is the entity ID? And at this point, somebody should be holding it. I don't feel like we need to know what hand it is. I do think we need the final I think more importantly than the hand position and all that, it is the projectile. I need the pointer. I need a position, and I need a direction. Now, let's say that position, direction. And with that, you can look up the entity tag, and then you can determine how to fire it. Okay. So we can say we'll do some of this. That will be entity trigger squeeze. This will be member ID is equal to this orchestrator member ID. What else? The entity ID, which is this intersected mesh ID. What else? It is the position, which is this grip or palm mesh position as array. And the direction will be direction. Doing some research. Let's see, where was I? We want to shoot it in a direction. So what is the direction? I think that is equal to, we need array, and this input source pointer, input source pointer forward in direction, Even 10 meters in front of you is a direction. So that should give us a direction as, okay, what is this? This is a ray to the methods on an array, direction, length, origin, yes. Let's see, you can clone array, intersect, determine intersection, intersects the plane, intersects the mesh, create new transform. Actually, I don't need the array, right? Because if I have the position of the pointer and the position going forward, isn't that just the direction? Is this minus this? Right? I don't need these extra properties. Is there like a ray vector? Create new origin end, transform ref, update. Let's see. Babylon JS get vector from array. Properties, direction, length. Oh, that's it, direction. The direction is a vector 3. It's precisely what we want. Actually, I think it might just be this. The forward direction of the transform. I think it just might be this. As array. So that'll give you a squeeze. And it's not the palm mesh, it's going to be this import pointer. Absolute position as array. And we'll send that outward and inward. And in the basic interactable, okay, we already made a grab before we got in here, so whoops. And finally over here, race condition, so one of these will emit something. So if you get a other hand squeeze, that other hand is going to emit a message, so you don't need to emit anything here. If you get if any of those things happen, you're going to want to do this. So you're going to pipe. So if that does happen, then you tap and then you do that. Another player stole our entity, so we don't need to do anything. That other entity will emit something. Now, if we release it, we do need to say we're the ones responsible for emitting something here. So we should emit something similar to this right here. So it would be entity released, and this has a different kind of payload. This had the main difference between this is that there's also a linear velocity and a, let's do it this way where it's optional. Now we can have that. And then can we get the add linear velocity and angular velocity from physics controllers. So event P linear velocity equals this input source grip physics imposter get linear velocity as array, and event P dot angular velocity would be the same thing, but get angular velocity. This will get C vector 3 as well as array. What else can you get? Okay. So we'll see if we get anything for that. That sets everything. So we'll see what kind of message we get now. Well, this is going to be hard to test in the emulator because the squeeze isn't being even sent. So we may have a hard time testing this. Also, we have to align it together. So maybe the next steps are, so we're emitting the proper messages for this. So create message handlers for entity trigger squeezed and entity grabbed, entity released, taking the entity tags into consideration. Also, a late joiner needs to know that the entity was picked up, was moved. So when we load a position on the entity server side. Server side can't predict final position though, so maybe add delay, then query a user for final position. Add physics MO, we did that. We did this. We want to verify that angular velocity and linear velocity of controllers is set correctly. Inspect console.log in the headset. And apply, okay, we need to apply a physics imposter and an impulse when a throwable object is released. Okay, still a lot of work to do. We'll figure it out.